Thank you. Ginny Jeup, Trustee. Ahmed, Secretary.
Terrence, Trustee.
Valarie, Trustee. Colleen, Worden, Trustee.
Okay, we have the agenda before us. Before I move to approve it, I just want everybody to know that there is a superintendent evaluation and superintendent contract discussion. Both will probably be in closed session. And superintendent evaluation on Dr. Tuttle's request for closed session. So with that, I move to approve this agenda for November 18th. Support. Is there any discussion?
Yes, are we allowed to vote on closed session separately for the two items? Because I understand Dr. Tuttle has requested closed session for the evaluation, which is all right, but to discuss the contract, I'm not sure it's appropriate to discuss that in closed session.
Yes, they'd be two separate closed sessions.
Yes, so but I'm saying can we vote to go to closed session separately on this?
Yes,
Okay.
because we have to come out of closed session for the superintendent evaluation and vote on her evaluation.
Okay.
I have a question about the contract. I'm really confused about what we're doing with the contract. We got a legal opinion today, but are we voting on something with the contract tonight?
Yes, we are going over the legal changes in the contract and discussing the contract.
But we got the legal opinion today at 1:15 or so, and so we're gonna digest that and have a discussion and vote on it tonight.
We can.
I think we should have a discussion about that. It seems like there's the legal opinion was about 7 pages long, and it seems like there's a lot of changes and ramifications, and I don't think we should be voting on any contracts. I get that we're gonna discuss it, and I'm glad that the attorney's here, but it doesn't seem like it's enough time to digest what's gone on, and all the changes, including some of the language that's been added to the contracts tonight.
Okay. Any other discussion on the agenda? Can I have a vote whether or not to approve? Everyone say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving into public comment. Is there any public comment? Public comment? All right, then I have moved to go into closed session to discuss the Dr. Tuttle's evaluation. Second. We'll call vote. Trustee Ismail? Yes. Trustee Jeup?
Yes.
Trustee Ahmed?
Yes.
Chisholm?
Yes.
Trustee St. John?
Yes.
Trustee Worden?
Yes.
Yes, so we're moving into closed session. Evaluation was conducted in closed session upon her request, and with that, I move to adopt the evaluation for Dr. Tuttle. The overall rating for Dr. Tuttle is an effective rating. This is the highest rating allowable for a superintendent. Can I have a second?
Support.
All right, support by Trustee Pappas. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. All right, the motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Kaminsky, and thank you, Dr. Tuttle.
My pleasure. I enjoyed being with everyone. Thank you for your feedback.
Next up is the discussion for the superintendent contract. I've asked Dr. Tuttle to be excused for this discussion. And with that, I move to go into, well, I think we could take a 5-minute
Can I ask, why do we need to go into closed session? It's just like, these seem like they're changes in state law. Why do we need to go into closed session for this?
Well, I think that's a deliberation we should have with the motion. So with that, I want to take a quick 5-minute break to allow Dr. Kaminsky to.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm going as quickly as I can, but I want to make sure that the correct file gets attached.
Delete it. Oops. So we'll break for 5 minutes. Okay. I move to go into closed session to review a legal opinion by Thompson Blaha under section 8H of the OMA. Can I have a second?
Support.
Trustee Jeup. Is there any discussion?
So I'm gonna renew what I just said before. I don't understand why we have to go into discussion for this. I mean, it's a discussion of what changed from Public Act 224 of 2023. And it's gonna talk, I'm guessing we're gonna talk about the revisions that we have to put into her contract. Why do we need to go into closed session for that?
For me, I think that you always go into closed session when you review your legal opinion from your attorneys.
But what's secret about what's gonna change about the state law? For me, it's you always stay in open session for transparency unless there's a reason to do so. And I guess I'm looking, if you could let me finish, please. The majority of this opinion appears to talk about the state law changes. So why can't the public hear that? I think they're entitled to know what the state law changes are.
We're talking about a precedent, someone's personal contract.
Well, I don't even understand where this came into. Since when? I thought we were talking about a contract, and then the next thing I know, there's stuff about her personal contract. Why are we even talking about her personal contract? She's 10 months into a 3-year contract. So why are we talking about that?
I don't have any more.
Well, I mean, because if someone could just give me a reason why we need to go into closed session to talk about legislative changes to teacher evaluation and superintendent evaluations and impact contracts. It says that it doesn't even, these don't even go into effect, I don't think. Well, isn't it for contracts that occur after a certain time?
My understanding went into effect July 1st, 2024.
Maybe that's just the appeal process. Well, I mean, counsel, could you tell us, I mean, do these impact contracts that were made prior to July 1st, 2024?
So I can do my best to answer that question. I'll say one thing is that I would prefer not to offer advice in open unless the board directs me to do so. Just as a matter of my standard practice, that I would only offer advice in private unless directed to offer advice in public. And number two, I think the answer to your question in terms of what you're talking about, the state of the law in Michigan, is all of the suite of changes that took effect this year that were passed at the very end of the last legislative session either took effect on February 13th, that's most of the para-related changes, or on July 1st, that's most of the evaluations and other school code-related changes. So between February 13th and July 1st of 2024.
So if we aren't changing her contract and it remains the same, can we enter into a contract prior to both of those dates? I don't remember the date. I knew sometime in February.
So she was
Her
at
contract
first
is out of compliance with the law.
Okay, so what you're telling us is that we have to make changes in her contract to come into compliance with the law, right?
There are certain portions of her existing contract that was adopted before those laws took effect that no longer match the state of the law's requirements, yes.
And so if these are just standard changes that we have to do, why do we have to go into closed session?
That's a political question for the board. I'm here at the request of the president, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I prefer not to give a legal opinion in public.
And I would support that, legal opinion belongs in a closed session.
It's about transparency. It's what's always been about, transparency. And I think we're really going into dangerous territories by going into closed session where we don't need to. Well, for a legal opinion on a contract, we didn't go in, no, not for changes that were made because of a legislative thing. Sure, if we're gonna talk about personal things with her contract, I get that. But we're talking about changes from the state law.
I would just like to say that I agree with that because I'm confused as to why it's confidential. I think closed session is for confidential things. I appreciate having legal counsel here to advise us on how all of these legislative changes impact and when and exactly what the wording needs to be, but all of everything that's in this legal opinion, as far as I can tell, is less an opinion and more just a stating of here are the new standards, here are what the statutes say. So from my perspective, which is not that of a lawyer, but it doesn't even look so much like a legal opinion as just a memo of this is something that you need to change. So I'm not seeing where there's any confidentiality or privilege necessary.
So I will simply note that we delivered the letter to the board, marked as privileged and confidential between attorneys and client. That's how we mark the product for you. So it's the board's privilege, it's not my privilege, but we have delivered it that way.
But just because you write a letter to us doesn't mean it's privileged. I mean, like this, I don't see anything in here that's privileged information. With all due
We're
respect,
talking about a personal contract.
okay, well, Ginny, you're not a lawyer, I am, and I know
Okay, well,
what
you're not speaking for the board. You're speaking as a trustee,
You're
just
right,
like
and
I am. So I have, stop interrupting me. I have the exact same opinion here, and I think we need to go into closed session for this.
Well, I'm afraid that we are delving into territory that's gonna get us into trouble, because you can't, just because you put privileged on a document doesn't mean it's privileged.
So we have the attorney that we pay that does school law for a living, school law specifically, and he says he's uncomfortable, he would prefer to give a legal opinion in closed session. I think that's enough reason to go into closed session. Real,
Well, I guess
Clear
it's just
cut.
more lack of transparency.
yeah, okay, keep campaigning, all right?
I don't need to
Please.
campaign anymore, I already won.
Yeah, God help us all.
All right, any other discussion? Well, I'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Ismail?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Jeup, yes. Trustee Pappas?
Yes.
Trustee Collins?
Yes.
Trustee St. John?
No.
Trustee Worden?
No.
I'm a yes, so we are in closed session. All right, Treasurer Collins?
Yes, I move to direct Board President Cotton to work with counsel to negotiate contract revisions, present to Dr. Tuttle and execute the contract changes if Dr. Tuttle is in agreement. These changes include, number one, revise the performance evaluation to comply with current state statutes. Number two, to negotiate the term of a superintendent contract per state statute not to exceed 5 years. Number three, to adopt a salary schedule in compliance with Michigan Supreme Court ruling not to exceed 2% per year. Sorry, I missed one. To revise the performance evaluation to comply with current, to add an appeal process for evaluations to include the following language. We will add an evaluation clause of the contract, including the following. If the superintendent disagrees with the rating given in the annual evaluation or semi-annual review, she may appeal pursuant to the below evaluation appeal clause. Again, we're going to add a new clause following the evaluation clause as follows. Evaluation appeal. No evaluation rating shall be final until agreed to by the superintendent or is mandated through this evaluation appeal process. Within 10 days following receipt of an evaluation rating, the superintendent may appeal the rating by a written request to the board president. Two, the board president, working with the director of human resources, will use their best efforts to impanel 3 professional superintendent evaluation facilitators called the panel to hear the superintendent's evaluation appeal within 30 days of the receipt of such written appeal. Number 3, agreement by 2 of the 3 professional facilitators will be the decision of the panel. The decision of the panel shall be final and binding upon the board and superintendent. Number 4, the cost of the evaluation appeal process and expense of the members of the panel shall be paid by the district. The next point is adopt a salary schedule in compliance with Michigan Supreme Court not to exceed 2% per year, and change any references within the contract, references to a standard for discipline from arbitrary and capricious to just cause.
I second that motion.
Second, is there any discussion?
Yes, I have some things I'd like to say. I think what went on tonight in closed session about this contract is nothing short of outrageous. We have an agenda before us that included a superintendent evaluation and superintendent contract. I specifically emailed President Cotton to ask him if this was going to include altering her contract or extending the contract, and I wasn't given an answer. The answer that I got was, I'm not really sure, something along those lines. And here we did, without informing our public, without telling our constituents, without telling our community that we're extending this contract for up to 5 years, that there are sweeping and material changes that are made to this contract. Now, part of it is because the state law requires it, but there are things in this contract, including the appeals process, that I was only given a copy of today at 1:15, and then I worked all day, and then I came here. And I repeatedly would like to ask that we extend this to December so that we have a chance to digest the things that council gave to us, so that we can determine whether or not the language that we put in this document for appeals is even something we want to do. And then the lack of transparency is just, it's horrendous that we are going to vote on this contract, extend her contract for up to 5 years without any members of our public to know about the amount of money we're giving her, that we're extending this up to 5 years, that we're completely changing the standard for discipline, or to tell her we don't want her to be superintendent anymore, from arbitrary and capricious to just cause compensation. I'm sorry, just cause is just, it's beyond the pale. And this is the very reason, this lack of transparency, why there's a whole new board. I mean, apparently the people at this table haven't figured out that this is not what the community wants. The community wants transparency. They want to know when they look at an agenda online that they're going to be, we're going to be voting on things that are on the agenda. There's nothing on here about altering her contract with adding a different form of discipline, a different standard of discipline, extending her contract for 5 years. I mean, 4 people on this board aren't even going to be on the board next year, and you're putting this kind of noose around a new board's neck, where it's outrageous. And there were editorials in the Grosse Pointe News 2 years ago that Mr. Collins put his name on that said it's outrageous that we're going to extend Dr. Dean's contract for a year. And for the members at this table to vote on this, it's just outrageous. And this is exactly why the community voted everybody out. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else? And I'll say too, you did ask me on Friday about extending the contract, and that's why I put that as a request to Collins and Blaha to give us information on what that would look like. No one else brought that up, and that was put into the opinion at your request.
But there's nothing on the agenda that said we were going to change the terms of her contract. And the public has the right to know at a public board meeting with notice that that's what we're going to do. And there's nothing on this agenda, I'm looking at it right now, that says we're going to alter the terms of her contract. All we received was a legal opinion from council that discussed the material changes that were going to be brought about by Public Act, I think it's 224 of 2023. That's what we were here to discuss. There's nothing in here that said that let our public know that we're going to be materially changing the terms of the superintendent's contract. Now, I've said this again, I've said it again, and I'll say it again. I like Dr. Tuttle. I wish that she stays with us. I told her that we are vested in having her succeed. But to do this 10 months into her contract is absolutely just beyond the pale. For our public, for our community, that our community doesn't get to weigh in on this. I mean, we have 2 members here that stayed here. We've been here now for close to 5 hours, and not any member of our public knows that we are going to vote on this tonight.
So, Trustee Jeup, you want to say something?
Yes, I just think it's very simple. We have an agenda, and we're meeting for the purpose of this contract. We've been here since 5:30. It is now 10:16. We've had a lot of deep conversation about it, a lot of healthy, good, deep conversation about it, and this is how we came out of the meeting. Thank you.
Any other? Yes.
So I wish this were 2 separate motions, because I absolutely support the statutory changes that are required by law. I know there's also a lot of things with retirement benefits that needed to be changed by law in order to make sure that someone gets their retirement benefits that they are entitled to. So I have no problem with any of that, but I do have a problem with the part of the motion that adds just cause, because that is not something that any other staff member has in their contract as part of cause for termination. Everybody else's standard is arbitrary and capricious, and to raise the superintendent above everyone else is just a recipe for resentment among our staff, and I think we already have pretty low morale among staff just due to the national situation. It's not necessarily anything specific to Dr. Tuttle, but I think it's very hard to keep teachers, and stating that we're going to make it harder to terminate the superintendent than any other staff member, it seems disrespectful. And also renewing for 5 years is a very long time when we don't know the financial situation and the future of the district. We don't know how other laws are going to change, and we don't know what the makeup of the board will be in 2 years, even, as we see that it obviously changes frequently. And especially to see that at least 2 trustees up here pitched an absolute fit when a previous superintendent got to have his contract renewed, which, for the record, I also think it was too early to renew a contract when he hadn't even served in that position for a year. That is also why I think it is much too early to renew this contract when Dr. Tuttle has not served for a full year, especially not for 5 years, which is the maximum allowed by law. So I think this is just a way that it's going to continue to breed resentment among the staff, which is the absolute last thing we need in this political climate.
Yes, Trustee Collins?
I was perhaps one of the 2 people who had the largest issue with extending the contract of our current superintendent, but it had nothing to do with his length of service to the district. It had to do with 2 main things. One was the enrollment, which was projected to be plus 145, which was minus 145, with anyone with any common sense would have known was going to happen in our district when we chose to return to school in mask. And a budget that we knew from the GAA number 1 in the budget audit that year, where we were already underwater. Probably we were going to end up we ended up the year minus $5 million. So those were the reasons why I didn't want to extend the superintendent's contract. It had nothing to do with his length of service. It had to do with performance. And that is why I believe that it's so important that we extend the contract or negotiate these changes to the contract. We haven't made any final decision whether we're going to extend the contract or not, leave it out. What we're authorizing in that motion is the ability to do that. But we've had a superintendent who's performed exceptionally in both of those and created a culture that I believe has attracted people back to this district, and we need to keep those people in the district. We can't afford to be in a roller coaster next year with a superintendent who's has a contract which is a year from expiring, or a year and a half from expiring at that point. I believe that we need to make it well known that she's respected and that she's being rewarded for the performance that she's given over the last 10 months. And everything that looks this year will be great this year based on, again, balancing the budget or coming up with a budget that was achievable this year for next June. That's why I'm doing it. Again, we're comparing apples and oranges as to why my comments from 2 years ago, but again, that's just my opinion.
Well, I'd like to echo that as well. When we objected to the extensions of Dr. Dean's contract, it wasn't just Dr. Dean, it was a whole group of central administrators, and we were in declining enrollment. We had already gotten numbers that were bad. He also didn't have the experience. He was a deputy superintendent that had been recently elevated to a superintendent position, and the district was in definite decline. And I'd like to remind people that when they had all of those contracts renewed, 2 weeks later or less, it was 2 to 4 weeks later, I don't remember exactly, but it was almost literally the next meeting, the teachers, we were told that we had to cut back teachers. And so when we talk about respect for staff and we talk about morale, it's interesting how that wasn't a factor just a short time ago, because there were multiple central administrators that were making significant money. We fought for a budget cut that did not involve cutting multiple people at the lowest end of the pyramid in the district that had the most impact on classrooms. And it took quite a few of them, including like a person who was part-time running a student store at North, right? Isn't North the school that was, we were so out to get, but yet we were trying to protect people at the lowest level as opposed to central administrators that were making significant money. One person worth 2 positions on the teaching staff and several more if you're going to equal a parapro position. So, or somebody who's part-time running a student store. So we fought budget cuts that were going to most impact the classroom. And we have people on the board that have repeatedly used the term gut. And what I found amusing is that I had numerous conversations with people in education and administrators. And the first thing, and I said without giving them any parameters, what would you cut? The first thing they said was, you've got too many people in your publicity department and you've got 2 curriculum directors. With the size districts you have, that's absolutely needs to be cut back to 1 curriculum director. That was the advice of administrators in other districts to me. And so it's interesting how, the stories change, but we fought to keep boots on the ground and in the classroom. There was a big difference between the experience that Dr. John Dean had at the moment that he was asking, and of course, in a month later, recommending to cut teachers and how many teachers were going to be laid off, to a superintendent that's come in with 15 years of experience as a superintendent, who's come in who we now have we have increasing enrollment for the first time in a decade. And we have a balanced budget where our budget was in free fall. And let's not forget that the previous administration misrepresented, I would like to say lied, but we'll use the term misrepresented, the fact that they were using COVID dollars to plug holes in the budget, because we were told as a board that wasn't happening. But oh yes, it was happening. So let's talk about transparency there. There was no transparency there because they were using COVID dollars, like many districts, to plug holes in the general fund. But we weren't told that, honestly. We were told it wasn't happening. So now we have a superintendent who has balanced the budget, who has $1 million in surplus and increasing enrollment for the first time in 10 years and 15 years of experience. And I will never forget the first go around when we hired Dr. Dean, because one of the concerns were there were not any female applicants, and we now have a female superintendent. So I absolutely, since COVID has happened, people are leaving our profession in education and getting their retirement. And every one of us that's eligible for retirement is looking and counting the days for how long. And that includes superintendents. So we need to protect what we have. The pool has changed dramatically just since we hired Dr. Tuttle. And absolutely, we need to protect and continue some consistency with a leader who's already shown in a short amount of time that she can deliver actual results. So absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree with this proposal.
My turn. As I mentioned to some of you, what's happened since November in other school systems has put a big eyeball on Grosse Pointe. A lot of people are watching what Dr. Tuttle has accomplished past year here, and a lot of them are salivating for it. And anything we can do to keep her here, we need to do, because the market out there is dry. I can't think there's maybe 2 in the state that have her acumen and that would be equals. And I wholeheartedly support Terry's motion. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I hope we're successful. It doesn't mean you're going to get the extension. Hopefully you will, and anything we can do to do so. I appreciate the effort you're going to put into this, President Cotton, to try to make it work.
Is there any other discussion?
roll call vote. Vice President Ismail,
Yes.
Trustee Jeup,
Yes.
Secretary Pappas,
Yes.
Treasurer Collins,
Yes.
Trustee St. John,
No.
Trustee Worden.
No.
Yes, so the motion passes.
We had two people say so long, do we want to give them the opportunity for public comment?
Does anybody have a problem with that?
I don't know if you can.
I have no public comment.
No? Okay, then we are adjourned.